Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be pondering life as one of the last individual humans in the world in Pluribus, the new show from Vince Gilligan, and then hustling to the top of the ping pong world in Marty Supreme. But before all of that, Nick, do you have anything to recommend to our listeners?
Well, in a minute we'll be talking about our number 1 show of 2025, but before that I thought I'd talk about my number 5 show of 2025, because The Traitors is back on, and I have of course been watching it, because frankly half the fun of this show is watching it along with the discourse, and finishing an episode and then going on Blue Sky to see everyone going nuts posting weird gifs. So yeah, they're back, they're in the castle, it's the civilian edition this time again, after the exciting celebrity version we had, what feels like only about a month ago, but nonetheless, we're back already, because I guess this seems to have become a bit of a New Year's tradition for the old BBC One controllers. And yeah, the big twist this year was that there was a secret traitor in the castle, in addition to the 3 regular ones, who even we, the omnipotent viewers, did not know the identity of. And this secret traitor was telling the traitors, the standard very salted traitors, who they could murder, and therefore they were getting annoyed because they felt they were being middle managed, and also we got to play along at home. And in the end, spoilers for season 4 of The Traitors, I guess. I sort of feel like if you care about Traitors spoilers, you're probably going to have trouble in your life at this stage, because I'm spoiling stuff that will be about a fortnight old by the time we release this.
Yeah, I was just thinking, by the time this comes out, and also with the frenetic pace of Traitors social media, you kind of really have to watch it on the day, if not the day after.
Yeah, so yeah, spoilers for episode 3 of The Traitors, which is nearly 2 weeks old. Yeah, the secret traitor twist had basically been spilled by episode 3. Yeah, at the end of episode 3, the cliffhanger was that they were about to reveal the secret traitor, and then they did in episode 4. It's a weird one, if only because that was definitely meant to be the big new twist, new idea, new concept for the contest in this season, and then they just sort of undid it in episode 4. I suspect it might have been because one of the regular traitors this year was rubbish and got caught very, very quickly, and I assume in their game plan they probably had, right, as soon as they catch a traitor, we'll then reveal the secret traitor. But they probably thought that might take more than 3 episodes. But alas, no, Hugo, one of the original traitors, was a bit of a blowhard who just couldn't resist making pretentious sounding offs around the castle, and then ended up getting banished fairly quickly, either because this was suspicious or because this was annoying.
Is he the younger of the 2 male traitors or the older one?
The older one, the barrister.
Oh, right, yeah. I've seen some of this and sort of been enjoying this show vicariously through my partner, who's a big fan of the Traitors. So yeah, I saw the bit about the secret traitor and, yeah, some of the shenanigans and how there's a lot of drama, apparently, this time. So looks like it's up to its usual standard of entertaining good fun.
Well, it's got the usual main thing you seem to get from the Traitors, where someone goes in who has a job which you might think maybe suggests they would somehow be good at this, and, you know, talks up a bit about how good at this they're going to be, and then they turn out to be rubbish. This year we had both a psychologist and a former police detective completely failing to identify any traitors.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I mean that's based the same as, was it in the celebrity version, there's just, academic historian who couldn't really notice things directly in front of them.
I don't know how well academic history really translates to identifying people lying to you, but yeah.
That's a good point.
But yeah, the police detective really did seem to think she might have a chance at the beginning, but instead she got caught in this weird back and forth pissing match with one other contestant who was not a traitor, and they just kept voting for each other every episode until the detective was eventually voted out, possibly just because it was getting annoying.
So, yeah.
And then there's become this ridiculous twist at the end of the last episode. Well, not twist, just stupid development, really. Well, the last episode I saw, I've seen up to episode 5, where the police detective only told one person she was a police detective, and as soon as she was voted off the castle, this person who was a traitor went and announced it to everybody, and then one of the other traitors seemed to decide this means she was plotting against her, and angrily accused this traitor of being a traitor in front of everybody, which of course she knows that she is, which is just a slightly ridiculous, self-destructive thing to do. But, you know, it's all good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, well that's what you come to your traitors for, betrayal, especially the traitors betraying other traitors, traitor on traitor treachery.
That is often the good bit, although I have to say it's maybe come a bit early for my liking. Usually, I don't know, I feel like the traitor on traitor action would have a bit more weight if it had taken a few more episodes to come to pass. Like, it doesn't really feel like there's, you know, a fracture in the existing team here. It kind of feels like these are people who kind of rubbed each other up the wrong way to begin with and were never really going to get along. It's an interesting season of Traitors. As someone who plays games and does writing and generally overinvests in in, I don't know, picking apart the mechanics of things. I quite like seeing the changes they make to the game and the ways they tweak it to try and, keep things interesting as this franchise gets to season 4, which is, traditionally when your TV show starts to officially stop being the exciting new thing and become a bit of a regular fixture, a bit part of the furniture. So I can see them trying to, mix things up a bit more, keep things interesting, keep everyone on board. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure this is a vintage series of Traitors, but we'll see.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that adding the secret traitor element is definitely something that kind of keeps it interesting when they're on, I guess, series 4 of regular traitors with plus one series of celebrity traitors. So, yeah, they need to find a way to keep it interesting. And this does sound, genuinely, without kind of just totally turning the whole thing on its head. Sounds like a good evolution.
Yeah, as I say, it's a good evolution to the extent that, as I say, I'm slightly disappointed it didn't go longer. I guess realistically it was only ever going to go maybe a couple of episodes longer. They've usually caught at least one traitor in the first half of the show. But it was interesting anyway. And to be fair, the secret traitor did turn out to be exactly who everyone hoped it would be. And they have then proceeded to cause immense drama. So yeah, I'm still enjoying this. I don't know if it'll be quite as high in the top 5 this year. To be fair, it depends how good this year's Celebrity Edition is. But yeah, it's still fun. They're still very good at making it seem a weird combination of tasty drama, yet fun and games.
Yeah, Super still got this kind of high gothic camp element to it as well, which seemed to be very much part of the appeal before.
Yeah, still lots of Claudia Winkleman making ridiculous, dramatic, ironic remarks and standing there next to these massive druids in enormous cloaks and lots of setting stuff on fire. There was a game where they had to fish coffins out of a massive lake and then put them in graves with the contestants' names on them to signify which contestant they thought deserved to be murdered or something like that. There was another episode where someone got murdered in person by the traitors and was just left in a cage in a forest for the traitors to come and find them. So yeah, they're very much investing in that and shooting it with the most ludicrous, over-the-top drama and music possible.
That sounds like, a core part of the fun. I guess it's because, there's an element you're not supposed to take this too seriously. It is a game that's a bit dramatic and over the top and things like that.
Yeah. No, as long as it continues to be silly, it'll probably still be fun to watch. I'm interested to see if this turns out to be a classic vintage series, but we're only halfway through, so there's still several contestants who have barely done or said anything, which usually means that they're the ones who will probably go a bit further at the end, and at the moment we're just, scything our way through the people who are going to go in the first 2/3 of the series.
Sort of quietly flying under the radar to make it into the second half by not attracting attention.
Yeah, I'm always a little interested how much of that is, reality and how much of that is editing. There are certain people who just get more time in the edit in the first half because they're the ones who are going to get chucked out quicker, so they give them more time so they actually appear on screen, safe in the knowledge, but the ones who last longer will get more time later. So yeah, I don't know if it is just that these people who stay quiet last longer or if it's just that it seems that way.
Yeah, I guess they want to make sure that they build up the characters of the people who get ejected early, so you feel some emotion one way or another when someone gets banished in the early part. You need to know who these people are to care.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense. But I guess this is traitor editing chronology, as we have no particular insight into how the show is actually made. But it does sound like it is, still loads of fun and immensely enjoyable.
Yeah, no, I'm still here for it. Still got to watch episode 6 at some point today, and I'm very excited to see how they follow up that ridiculous traitor on traitor cliffhanger. So yeah, exciting times in the castle. So yep, that is what I and much of the population of Britain have been doing. Alistair, how about you?
Right, so I've been watching a TV show over the Christmas break that we discussed on the podcast before, but I've got some more considered opinions now. I just finished the 3rd season of Foundation on Apple+. This is, the sort of space opera show based on the series of novels by Isaac Asimov, or as it turns out this season, pretty much just the sort of wider universe of all the Asimov novels, as they're bringing in sort of bits from all sorts of different parts of Asimov's writing. And yeah, in its 3rd season, I feel this show's got to the point when it's developed its own distinct identity and way of doing things, and I guess its own internal lore and logic and things like that, which is typically the point with a sci-fi show. You get to the end of the 3rd season, there's been quite a lot of episodes, quite a lot has been built up, you spent quite a lot of time with the characters, so you get to know them. And I've possibly been a bit dismissive of this show because of some of the massive liberties it takes with the books. We'll come to that, but one thing is that I've come to appreciate about it is that it's really sort of added some more drama and personality that the novels don't have. Although they're interesting, a lot of clever ideas, they can be quite dry, and the TV show has come up with an interesting way to do lots of stuff in the novels that is in a kind of creative and interesting way, which is why I'm finding it quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I haven't seen this. I have seen it come up sort of occasionally on the discourse. There's a few people on my timeline who seem to really like it and insist it's, really good and better than you'd think, an underappreciated gem, but it only seems to happen a few times a year.
It's what I'd recommend to your fan of your sort of epic sci-fi novels. However, it's a difficult one because if you're really attached to the books, you might be a bit upset with some of the liberties they've taken with the story. But at the same time, it is, I think, a really good, like, space opera, and it's probably a bit more intelligent than a lot of, like, things that are more just sort of chases and fights in space, basically trying to emulate Star Wars. The interesting thing about this season is, they're doing the Mule, which is kind of the big villain of the Foundation novels, especially the original trilogy of Foundation novels. One individual who has the ability to throw all of Harry Seldon's plan off the rails, which is, a big character. They've come up with an interesting approach to the Mule to make him more of a villain, more of a big sort of bad villain than he is in the book, including, randomly executing people, and having some sort of like bizarre Iron Man, almost like sort of armored suit type thing that shoots lightning to make him a bit more of a villain. So I don't know how much of that's really in the spirit of the Foundation novels, but it does make for a good like on-screen villain. One of the other liberties they've taken with the book is the sort of arc plot of the whole thing is about being able to see the future, but on a macro scale. However, they've introduced characters who can see into their own future, which is definitely not an Asimov thing, but it works as a plot device.
Obviously I know nothing about Asimov, but I didn't get the impression there was a huge amount of Marvel-esque energy bolts in the Foundation novels.
No, they are, they are or can be quite dry. They're sort of written more as they're written as like prose, like a novel, but they're supposed to more be like a history of the Foundation set across centuries. I mean, one of the problems that the show's had to grapple with is with such a large scope of time, you need to have like reoccurring main characters, considering the initial book the original book was published as short fiction, so it's divided into, I think, 6 chunks, and each one has like a different main character, usually set, decades to centuries between them. They've come up with some clever ways to get around this, including various characters sort of been hibernating in cryogenesis or been turned into holograms so that they can come back from the dead in that way. So I guess the point that I kind of want people to take away from this is that what are fairly dry, although novels with some interesting bits, they've have come up with a way to make it like dramatic and exciting and like good TV without kind of making it just really dumb and just throwing in like loads of like sex and violence that isn't there. So it's a challenging series of books to adapt. I mean, like, the Dune films are much better, but, Dune has, like, huge battles, psychedelics, these, like, big epic characters, with complex character arcs and stuff. Foundation's it's kind of not really on that level. It's very much a book about ideas. And I'm sure there are people out there who would want them to do something that's more about the ideas, but I kind of like the fact that this is, like, it is good, entertaining space adventure TV.
Plus, it's got Lee Pace in it, which I always enjoy. I do sometimes consider watching it just to, see him. Yeah,
Lee Pace is very good. Other than Jared Harris, probably the most reoccurring character. Yeah, and he gets a lot of good moments in season 3. One of my favourite ideas they've come up with in the TV show that's not in the book is that the Emperor of the Galactic Empire is a clone. And he's been sort of continually cloning himself. And by series 3, he's up to sort of the 26th version of himself, which does allow Lee Pace to keep playing the Emperor, even though, the plot's set across centuries and centuries. And there's quite an interesting range of how he can play different emperors with their quite different personalities. The one in series 3 he's playing is a bit more of a playboy who kind of wants to run away from his imperial authority and clashes with the older version of himself, this sort of aging clone who was the emperor before him, who's becoming a bit tyrannical. Some good drama there. This certainly encouraged me to watch more stuff with Lee Pace in. He's good at playing, a range of characters, all with the same name and face in this.
I will take this opportunity to plug Halt and Catch Fire, a very, very good show that has Lee Pace in it.
Yes, I've heard good things about that, and I do really want to watch it, especially as my interest in computers and the history of computing.
In that case, you'll definitely probably like it. I still need to watch Pushing Daisies, another well-reviewed show that has Lee Pace in it.
Yeah, that's by one of our favourite creators, whose name I keep forgetting, which is embarrassing.
Brian Fuller.
Brian Fuller, that's the name, yeah.
He has a movie out at some point, now or soon or recently, which I do keep meaning to get us to cover, but I've never noticed it actually having a UK release. Anyway, maybe one day.
Yeah, when it comes, yeah. But so definitely Lee Pace. There's a reason why he's, I guess, almost like the co-lead of this, opposite Jared Harris playing Harry Seldon, the sort of founder of the Foundation, who lives on as a hologram. So they're kind of the main characters of each side of the conflict, the Foundation and the Empire. The other thing I want to say is they do actually pull off some of the quite nuanced and clever twists from the book, which I actually wasn't expecting, especially some of the liberties they take, and like, for example, the Mule being a bit more of a space pirate who can shoot lightning bolts. There are some good twists. Well, there's a twist at the end of Foundation and Empire, and a twist at the end of Second Foundation, the novels, which if you've read the novels, you'll know what they are. If you don't, I won't spoil it in case you haven't seen the TV show. But as they simplified quite a few things of what is a complex timeline, it actually lured me into this false sense of, oh, they're not doing that, it wouldn't work in this show, they're doing something much more straightforward. They actually managed to catch me off guard, being like, oh, you are doing that twist. Oh, right, okay, interesting. And it's well done. This probably sounds like needlessly cryptic, but I don't want to spoil the TV show for people who haven't seen it, or the books for people who haven't read it. But that's probably enough. If you have read the books or seen the TV show, there's probably enough clues there to know what I'm alluring to.
Okay, because we spoke briefly about this, I think, shortly after we saw Marty Supreme at the cinema for this podcast about, a week and a half ago. And you seemed a bit less positive about it than you now are, so I assume the third season ended pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen about 3 or 4 of the 10 episodes of the season at that point. And then kind of over Christmas, choked down the rest. And it does get really, really good. Yeah, like I say, they pull off some of the surprise twists from the book. They do build to like some interesting, very dramatic conclusions, including like adding some new things that aren't in the book. For example, this season also introduced the Empire has built basically a Death Star type planet destroying weapon, which is pretty horrendous when it gets used. So there's some pretty big epic bits of that. And also I think the fact that like watching it in quite rapid succession, like 1 or 2 episodes a day over the course of like a week, did mean that like, you get more into the drama. You kind of appreciate the twists more when you see their payoffs more quickly. So I may have been a bit harsh on Foundation, but I think at this point it's pretty good and it's very entertaining. And if you've got your Apple Plus subscription and you've seen all the stuff we've been talking about before, Pluribus, Slow Horses, Severance, then this is certainly worth a go. It's got this sad thing of like, we're into the third season, possibly a little bit of a shaky start with, some slower bits in the first season. So I always take a pinch of salt when I say like, it gets really good by season 3. You just got to wade through some stuff first. It's not quite that bad, maybe. But in the spirit of great sci-fi shows, Voyager, Babylon 5, they have a little bit of a false start. It does pay off from sticking with.
Okay, maybe one day. It's on the list, as many things are. Okay, and now it's time to talk about our number 1 TV show of 2025. It is Pluribus, the new series from Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and this time he's gone back into the sort of contemporary sci-fi genre, as I believe Gilligan came up working on The X-Files. So this is kind of within that wheelhouse, I guess. This is a show about the population of Earth suddenly being absorbed into a massive alien hive mind after they receive a mysterious transmission of some kind of strange virus and decide, as people self-destructively do, to make this virus, just to, see what happens. And then lo and behold, it absorbs everyone into a massive hive mind except for about a dozen people, one of whom is the already slightly bitter and withdrawn writer Carol Sturcker, played by Ray Seahorn, who must then try not to become even more bitter and withdrawn, as she's now one of the only fully sentient, self-aware people on the planet Earth. And yep, that is the premise of Pluribus. We have seen the whole of this show. We, as I say, gave it a pretty rave review in our review of the year, when I think I hadn't seen the finale and Alistair hadn't seen the second half, final third of the show. So, I guess it's time to find out if we have regrets. Alistair, how was it?
It's absolutely brilliant. It lives up to the hype completely. And I would have probably put this in the number 1 slot had I finished it before we recorded the previous episode. But I have absolutely no regrets about putting this as the joint MFV best show of 2025. It is just really, really good. It just works on quite a lot of levels. Visually, characters are interesting. But one thing I want to dive into first, which is probably the thing I liked the most about it, was how philosophical the show it is, and how it really is a show with lots of interesting ideas. And it kind of explores them again in a interesting and engaging way. It's not like a show that monologues or diktats or things like that. Also, it doesn't feel the need to dress this philosophy or whatever up, with excessive drama or lots of comedy. I mean, for example, The Good Place is a show all about moral philosophy, but it wraps it up in a kind of feel-good rom-com sort of vibe, which is fair enough. That's one way to do it. But this is much more, I feel, directly about the ideas. And there are big ideas, so the main thing being the collective versus the individual. Almost the entire planet's been merged into basically one individual that thinks in one way and acts in one way, and very, very much focuses on a sort of Jeremy Bentham greatest good for the greatest number of people. There's no individualism. Everything becomes optimized for efficiency. Things are all run for collective benefit. and it explores the idea, is this better? Is this total crushing the individual and replacing it with this kind of collective Benthamite way of looking at the world? Does that lead to things being better? Also, the crucial philosophical thing, which is that the main character, Carol, does not want to be a part of it. She wants to remain a separate individual, but, the collective, which doesn't really have a name as well, wants to make her a part of it against her will because they feel it's in her best interests. And it looks pretty good. Maybe it is in her best interest. It explores, does she have a right to live possibly a life of, certainly, I guess, more suffering than she would experience if she were to join the collective? Do they have that right to force her, in essence, to become a part of it? And it really is putting those big ideas right up front and making them entertaining and engaging in a grown-up, intelligent, sophisticated way.
Yeah. It's one of those shows which I think sparks interesting conversations. I've had various chats with my partner and with other people who have seen it about, as you say, some of the obvious questions like, would you choose to be part of this collective? Some of the metaphorical side issues like, is Gilligan talking about AI? Is he talking about our life in a very internet-enabled world? Is he commenting on loneliness? Is he doing all three of those things?
Is it about communism or socialism? The idea of pooling resources, putting the men of the collective above the individual. That is in some way how communism certainly is supposed to work. Interesting. I hadn't necessarily considered the AI aspect to it. I really thought this is a show about communism and socialism, but it's one of those things that really benefits from discussion because it brings up these ideas.
It's just the sort of really middle of the road, smoothed down version of humanity that the collective is delivering to you by just splurging everyone into one mass, which occasionally makes you think about AI. I have seen Vince Gilligan
I totally see that.
Some quite mean things about AI during the promotional rounds for this show. So he certainly thinks that. Whether he was thinking it when he wrote it, I don't know. Because I gather this is something he's had in mind for quite a while, again, based on things he's said.
I guess people are aware that AI has been on the horizon for a while, and also it's a topic explored in science fiction a lot. But also there's this element in this show, it never uses big words, big philosophical, political labels, socialism, communism. I kind of feel this idea of as you say, the kind of blandness of the collective is a big part of the show. They're quite nice. They're preserving the planet. They're not harming animals. They're looking after everything, trying to make things run as efficiently so that we have minimal impact to the planet and things like that. But it is kind of, there is this general blandness. And again, that's one of the things people argue about communism or socialism or these big kind of left-wing collectivist philosophies, which is that even if, we're leaving aside, Stalin and all that, and where it can go wrong, this idea even if it went well, would it just be kind of dull to live in a world where everyone's given kind of the same what they need, and then everything's provided for and everything's kind of run quite well, but the rough edges of humanity are sanded off to make things more efficient and better. But that's maybe where the interesting things come up, the collective, whatever they are. They don't have a name. They don't seem to produce art. They don't really produce ideas or anything like that. There's an interesting bit in the final episode, this isn't so much of a spoiler, which is when one of the other 11 people joins the collective voluntarily, one of the people who wasn't able to join it first, surrounded by her community that's all joined it, and they're all singing when she joins. And then the second she becomes a part, they all stop singing and they just quietly go about doing their work. And it's always the collective has no creativity, it seems to have no imagination, it's not capable of doing anything. It doesn't even have any big ideas to make the world better. It just kind of runs things as they are, slightly more efficiently. One of the things I obviously thought, if the collective really wants to make humanity minimize its impact on the planet, the easy way to do that would just move everyone to one big city. But it doesn't do that. Maybe because that's not what the show's about. But also, I think it's kind of saying the collective doesn't have any new ideas. Again, which also kind of relates to the AI point. It's just regurgitating what's already there. Yeah, it's just fascinating.
Well, yeah, there's another bit in one of the last couple of episodes where the main character, Carol, starts writing again, and the collective says they're very excited to finally have a new book to read. It's at last, someone on Earth has written a book. Yeah. Imagine being devoid of content in the current century.
Yeah, exactly. But then they seem happier than we are, which is the big... that's the big thing, is kind of nags in the back of the head. I don't know, I don't think I would choose to join the collective. I kind of like my individualism, but also they're happy. They kind of are happy. There's a great bit when one character, who the main character, Carol, forms a relationship with this woman, and so she kind of speaks for the collective. She's kind of almost like a figurehead for them, even though they're all equal and all kind of one entity. And she says to Carol, if you saw someone drowning, wouldn't you throw them a lifeline? And then Carol's like, so I'm drowning by being a normal individual human. And they're like, yes, you're drowning, you don't know it. And like, it's kind of weird. Like, yeah, she is kind of unhappy, but also, would you choose? I think I would choose my own unhappiness over becoming just, having all my edges sanded off and just become part of this kind of bland, expanse of everything.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the bit in the end of the season, again, trying very vaguely to not spoil things, where Carol's left completely alone because the collective is just ignoring her for a bit, did look pretty grim. It's one of these things where would you choose to not be part of the collective? I mean, maybe if you're the right kind of person, you could make it work during the era when the collective are just basically servicing your every need. But the part where you're just left completely alone, apart from being given the absolute basics, does sound a bit rough.
Yeah, there's another character that Carol meets who basically is like, other than the collective, there's about sort of a handful of other people, the other characters, I suppose, in the show. And like, one of them is basically like, I'm just going to make the most of this because the collective looks after and cares for everyone and also gives them anything they want. Like, there's one episode when Carol just, as an offhand remark, asks for a grenade and they bring her a grenade. Without any thought. And so there's one person who's absolutely milking it, and kind of at one point there's quite a funny bit when he's sort of living a James Bond fantasy, getting the sort of collective to play all the other roles in this weird thing where he's like a kind of superstar spy stroke high stakes gambler type thing, which sometimes you might think like, well, that looks kind of like it'd be fun to have your every whim indulged, but also it's clearly so fake as well.
Well, yeah, but there's the inevitable bit at the end of that sequence where he finishes his little fantasy roleplay and leaves, and the collective, all the like beautiful women and attractive men in tuxedos who were around him, who were just sort of hanging on his every word and excitedly staring at his cards, their faces just immediately go blank and they just start quietly tidying the game away.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, it's almost like they keep him like a pet, which is, again, one of the sort of weird things about it. Yeah, you provide everything they want, but also at the same time, like, pets don't have freedom.
But then again, they mostly seem to have quite pleasant lives for the most part. The old, fully domesticated animal.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. This is the classic thing. It kind of weighs up happiness versus individualism, happiness versus freedom. Again, one of the big philosophical ideas that the show is overtly about.
Yeah, and it works it through interestingly, and it's got a very contemplative pace. It has, in some circles, really reignited the debate over how slow is too slow in TV show pacing. There was one episode 7, I think, which is, it's not completely dialogue free, but it's very, very low on dialogue. It's very much just Carol and the one other main character who gets a major arc, Manusos, just going about their business by themselves, because in both their cases they're not really interacting with the collective at that point and not really talking very much. I did very much see some people going, well, what did I just watch? What was the point of that? Couldn't that whole episode have been a single 5-minute montage? I liked it. I thought it was good.
Well, that's part of the show's style, which is the other thing about it, which is that, like, there isn't a lot of plot in this. It could be condensed down to a short story, something like that, or you could do this as a short film, for example, but the way that it unfolds is part of the fun of it, that it unfolds at this quite slow pace, but also everything feels so very natural. Like, sometimes TV shows you see people get to conclusions quite quickly, make decisions quickly, change because the TV show wants to keep moving, building towards its next piece, have a reasonable pace, keep you entertained. Better Call Saul, obviously, the previous show from Vince Gilligan, also felt quite like this. This is possibly even slower paced, but, things evolved quite slowly, but in a pace that felt very natural, and characters changed at a pace that felt realistic. Something my own writing I struggle with. I always find, like, I'm always so impatient, get to the next thing, get to the next twist. No, this is quite believable, this way to which it unfolds. And like, the whole thing takes place across about 70 days, because there's a little counter that comes up on screen. And you feel this, the character's really gone on a journey across that time. And we kind of see it unfold primarily through these like process montages that Vince Gilligan is well known for. But it feels like the pacing feels very natural and realistic, and which adds this element of you're watching real people really go through something.
Obviously, this isn't another show about morally ambiguous crime people, but it is, firstly, it's another show that's very interested in like process and a sense of plausible emotion and plausible reality. And secondly, it's another sort of quite intense character study of a single person for the most part. And you can still see the threads there. It's something he's very good at. It's the sort of story, I mean, Pluribus, we're, I guess, talking about it as if it's an amazing novelty, but as is the case in a lot of, really good stories or shows or whatever nowadays, it's not what they do, it's the way that they do it. I'm sure this story has been done before. I've not read thousands of pages of classic sci-fi, but is Day of the Triffids basically this? No, what am I thinking of? Body Snatchers, sorry.
Yeah, which is even directly referenced, I think, at one point in the show.
Yeah, there are things like Body Snatchers which are similar to this, and the difference is purely Vince Gilligan's approach, which is to try and think very carefully about how this specific thing would work and, what the interesting approach to take is.
Especially when you've got these characters who are quite stoic. they don't discuss their emotions and stuff or their thought processes, and also characters who are quite lonely because they're the only people left in the world and they're isolated from each other, so they don't have really people to share their thoughts with. It takes a while for Carol to develop a relationship with one of the collective so that she can actually, then have dialogue explaining how she feels about them or her situation. Again, but you see it through these like long montages when you see kind of like life unfolding and the things that she does. Again, it's kind of part of the appeal. It's also, I think one of those things, it's like a signature style. So this is sort of aimed at the Gillian fans. So, and they want to see his signature style. They, like, it's the same as like, when you go to see a Wes Anderson film, you want to see the quirkiness and the sort of, the theatrical way things are put together. Whereas in this, you want to see these kind of like detailed montages, the sort of whole process of like, what's she doing? 5 minutes of watching something come together and at the end being like, that's the plan. Which is, Better Call Saul was good for that as well.
The closest I have to a broad criticism of Pluribus is that I thought the first episode didn't quite fully capture me, as it had to do a lot of the very broad top-level setup beats in a way that was still well done, but felt quite similar to a lot of the other sci-fi shows I've seen do something like this. And I think episode 2 and beyond is when you get into the specific approach that makes this good.
Yeah, exactly, And I guess the first one... it's a classic pilot episode situation where it's just got to introduce everything and set everything up. And especially with a sci-fi thing like something, this is a bit more schlocky like Sliders or Quantum Leap. I mean, it's a bit, Quantum Leap's not so schlocky, but anyway, which usually, these sci-fi shows when someone falls through a portal or gets abducted by aliens or travels back in time and like, Life on Mars again, similar one, like they go to another world. And the first episode kind of has to set up the character's life in the regular world, so you like them and know what their life was like, and then also have the process of them falling through the portal or the time door or wherever it is, and then the world they end up in, right? First episode of this show is kind of like that, but there is no portal. Like, again, the character doesn't leave their world, the world just around them just totally radically changes. So it is a kind of classic sci-fi. We're setting things up, you really got to wait till at least the second episode before you actually get into what they're doing and stuff. Again, I don't know, Life on Mars cannons through in less than 10 minutes. This is a much slower paced TV show, which is the appeal of it. But so the first episode is kind of a bit different and things like that, but it does have some quite tense bits, I suppose. Does the old tension that Breaking Bad especially, that Vince Gilligan does well, of like kind of what's going on, oh my god, like, disasters and fear and things like that, so there's that element to it.
Yeah, but I think that was, I guess, part of the plan to the extent that I believe they dropped the first 2 episodes on the same day. So, I guess someone in the chain concluded that yes, they wanted to make sure people got to the good stuff.
Yeah, or at least the show could hit its stride after it's set up, Exactly, I mean, this is kind of a spoiler for the first episode. The crucial thing also about the first episode, which is I think a crucial element to the show, is that when the collective is formed, something like, I can't remember, they say, is it like 10% of people die? And one of them is the main character's wife. So the other big thing about the first episode is Carol's wife dies in this process. And that, I feel, is a really important element. Because again, while she's resisting, in her own little way against the collective, fighting back, he's sometimes just been quite mean to them, just like insulting them to their faces and things like that, and being generally unpleasant. The thing I felt I had to keep reminding myself in the back of the head is they sort of killed her wife. In some levels, she has a reason to feel aggrieved and alienated and scared of the collective, even though it looks really nice and friendly and they're looking after the environment and, they've stopped wars and racial prejudice and crime and poverty and all that sort of stuff has been cleared up. But also, again, it's the individual versus the collective. Maybe the whole world's better, but she as an individual has a right to feel aggrieved that they killed her wife.
Yeah, I mean, Carol, as I said last episode in the podcast, Carol is a quite prickly character, as Alistair said, for in some ways understandable reasons during this show. And, it's impressive that they've managed to make such a good, compelling TV show out of this occasionally unlikable character. Obviously, Ray Seahorn is doing a lot to sell that. She's great in this. The entire show, for large chunks of it, is just one long continuous shot of her, and she successfully holds the camera the whole time. I mean, I gather, the starting narrative of this show is that basically a lot of it came about because Vince Gilligan worked with her on Better Call Saul and wanted to give her a showcase. And if there's one thing he's achieved in this show, it's definitely that.
Yeah, absolutely, And she is great. And I think, as I said in the last episode, the summary episode, I can see why his response was, I want to build a show around you, because she's really talented and, again, could be the best part of Better Call Saul, even like a moment's outshining Bob Odenkirk by being understated and subtle, things like that, which is what this show is in many ways. So it works really, really well. And she makes this character who is quite dislikable, likable and relatable. And that's one of the other things the show's doing really well. It has this interesting character at its heart who is sort of likable and dislikable, but also has real humanity, and then the humanity is what Ray Seahorn's bringing to it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where they go with this, and hopefully she gets lots of awards when the award season rolls around for this.
I think she's already had one, actually, but I imagine she'll at least get nominated for, if not win, several more, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. The other thing I really liked about this show, this is potentially a bit of a spoiler, not a huge spoiler, but it's sort of not a spoiler, which I'll kind of maybe explain why, but if you really are spoiler adverse, again, maybe don't listen to this bit, or skip to the next bit, whatever. Anyway, the obvious thing with this show, which you'll kind of get, is that, certainly the early episodes, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, what's the downside? Okay, you kind of, right, I get it's the individual versus the collective. Things are a bit dull, but nice in the collective, and individuals get their freedom. But there's got to be a downside to this. Are they going to murder her? Are they, do they sacrifice children? Whatever it is. And you're kind of waiting for a long time for like, okay, I'm waiting for the moment when you find out that they're evil. I'm waiting for that. And it doesn't come. Because, and I kind of realised after a while, and the show's kind of like hints at it, and I kind of think like, oh yeah, because the show knows what your expectations are,
I mean, the show has one major beat, which we definitely won't spoil, where it basically seems to be giving that to you, and then sort of walks it back a bit.
Exactly, because Vince Gilligan and the show itself and the other creators are aware that like people are going to be sitting there thinking, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's it coming? So they play with you deliberately with that, which I really liked. But also, one of the things I realised when I was watching this unfold was like, there's not going to be an evil twist, obviously. Like, this is why it's kind of not a spoiler. When you think about it, you think, no, this show is too clever to give you an obvious out of like, oh, they're evil. They do something that's horrible. So therefore you're on Carol's side, and therefore, they're bad. After a while, I kind of realised, which, after thinking about it for like 5 minutes, it's not that kind of show where there's going to be a horrible twist. So I kind of feel like the lack of a twist is kind of obvious. Anyway, that's why it's not a twist. That probably sounds incredibly circular, or at least, or willfully obtuse. But it is something I really liked about the show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see whether it's going to get deeper into the sci-fi world building in future seasons, but I guess we'll have to keep watching to find out. Yeah, I'm very interested to see how Vince Gilligan handles that sort of thing.
That was a good end of season cliffhanger, which obviously feel absolutely no need to spoil. Best enjoyed as it is, but the way that they're antagonists to Carol, shall we say, not villains, I suppose, but antagonists, is straight up from the beginning, which is she doesn't want to be part of the collective. They're determined to make her a part of it. That's the conflict. And it's not to do with child sacrifice or anything as obvious as that, so...
Yeah.
Although interesting, there aren't actually that many children in the show, I guess, because maybe people get a bit queasy with the idea of them wiping out children's individualism. Similar to how in The Good Place they made the deliberate decision there'd be no children in the afterlife, because we know children do die early, but they just thought like it's not the vibe for the show. We want to remind people of that. So maybe it's a similar thing.
I feel like this show's probably going to hit that eventually. I mean, there is, I guess, the girl who joins the collective voluntarily at the start of the last episode is, I think, meant to be quite young. But yeah, I feel like it's something they'll probably eventually get into. But I guess the lead character, Carol, and indeed the other one, Manousos as well, don't exactly lead very child-focused existences. So we'll get to it, maybe.
Yeah, but this is a classy one. Yeah, believe the hype. Don't feel like, is this overhyped or whatever. Again, if you've got your Apple TV subscription, definitely watch this. It's probably the best thing that's on there.
Yeah, no, this was excellent. Happy to say, no regrets on my chart placing. Big relief to me.
Yeah, absolutely no regrets.
Okay, and next up, it's Marty Supreme, probably the first really overt Oscar contender movie of this winter season, or at least the first one we're covering. This is a story of Marty, a up-and-coming table tennis player played by Timothée Chalamet, who finds himself caught in a desperate scramble to get money, get in the game, win, return a dog to its owner. Just a desperate series of events as he cannons across town trying to get enough cash to compete in the next table tennis contest. We've seen it. Alistair, what did you think?
This is a great film. It's enjoyable for a certain type of enjoyability. The reason why I sort of smirk as I say that is that it's a really tense film. It's enjoyable. If you find tension too much, you might find this film too much. It's directed by Josh Safdie, who previously made Uncut Gems that we raved about on this podcast. But Uncut Gems is one of those films that it's so tense it kind of stops being fun almost at some point. Like the tension is almost like too unbearably high. This film has that signature, both like high energy, lots of tension, and that sense of this individual who's their own worst enemy and is sabotaging themselves. What I liked about this film is it overall felt less tragic, and there's less of the sense that Uncut Gems, like this guy's doomed and he's kind of inevitably Faust style just heading towards his own damnation. There's this genuine sense that there's some redeeming features to this story, which I kind of liked. But there are a lot of very tense, I can only really describe it as, oh God, what now? Kind of moments. Like, this guy, he can only go through so much, and like every single time, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that's just happened. Oh my God, what now? But partly a lot of them are self-inflicted, how the guy just destroys every lucky break that he gets just by, I don't know, trying to hustle more out of things, or just like never knowing when to quit, or just never knowing when to stop being his own worst enemy. This film's got real sort of energy and fun and an interesting dynamic to it, so I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I liked this. I perhaps didn't quite love it. I probably preferred Uncut Gems, which may just make me a depressing person to be around. But I did enjoy this. I think Timothée Chalamet has a lot of energy and charisma, and he's just very good playing this, as you say, self-destructive, very charismatic guy who just, on the one hand, could always talk his way into a break, but on the other hand, can then also talk his way into completely annihilating that break. And it does just keep looping around itself, and he's just very fun to watch doing that again and again. I will admit, eventually, the sort of looping shaggy dog nature of the plot made it feel a bit rambling to me. This is a solid 2.5 hours, and I will admit there were points in the sort of later middle where I was a bit, okay, and how long's left? How many more times is he going to almost achieve his goal and then fall flat on his face and stand on a rake or whatever? But yeah, no, it's definitely very well made. It's definitely good fun. Timothée Chalamet, I think probably the big winning takeaway here. I'd not be surprised if he was at least in the frame for some awards. Yeah,
certainly some nominations. There came a point I was watching it, in regards to the length and the shaggy dog nature of the story, which I think is a great way to describe this film, which is the kind of overall plot is they say he's trying to get enough money to go to Japan to compete in the World Table Tennis Tournament because he believes he's the Muhammad Ali of table tennis, which is just hilarious in and of itself. And I kind of realised, possibly about an hour into it, it's like, the film is mainly just him running in circles trying to get this money together. What I was thinking, okay, this is fun, but like, when's he going to get to Japan? And there's going to be like, we're going to get to the table tennis competition bit, and then it'll be like, oh, no. The film is not so much about his struggle to play table tennis. It's his struggle to scrape some form of basic living together and, get this money together. That's what the film's about. And then once I realised that, I kind of settled into it and realised, I'm just going to enjoy this kind of process of this guy standing up, falling over, standing up, falling over. The kind of dark comedy that comes from that. Then when I kind of settled into that, I sort of really appreciated it as a film.
Yeah, I did like the overall journey he went on. I thought the ending, like the last, 20 minutes, half an hour or so, is very strong. When we get to the closest he gets to a final table tennis showdown, and then the final payoff after that. I did really enjoy where the film actually ended up. I've seen, for some reason, some controversy about the ending. Possibly mostly that Timothée Chalamet's character is such a dick at some times in this film. But does he deserve what is, broadly speaking, a somewhat redemptive ending? But, I didn't mind it.
Yeah, as I say, it doesn't have the Faustian, he's just headed to oblivion. There's nothing stopping it, which Uncut Gems has. But I do agree with you that I did really like the ending, and the ending really made it work. Although the film is kind of basically about this guy's just sort of endless hustle. It's not a sort of, I'm reaching the phrase, but this kind of films like She's Gotta Have It, and we discussed in this podcast that are kind of about this looping process that just loops over and over and over. Inside Llewellyn Davis is kind of like that. She's Gotta Have It could be the most famous example, Spike Lee's first film. This is a bit more conventional in that sense that it does build to a narrative conclusion and climax, and brings its forces together and has a resolution and an ending and things like that. And when it gets to that point, it does really pay off what's happened. So in that sense, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, considering how rambling, as I say, some of the middle of the film is, I think, as you say, deliberately. I was actually quite surprised what a good, solid ending it has. I was almost, at that point in the film, preparing myself for some sort of, eternally looping ending. The hustle never ends. He's never going to reach a point of stillness or anything. He's just going to keep running on to the next attempt to screw money out of people.
Well, that's exactly, how Inside Llewellyn Davis ends. Well, it's not about screwing money out of people, but, the sort of cyclical cycle. And that's a film that's kind of similarly bleak, but a lot less frenetic than this movie. But there is a sort of similar vibe and a sort of similar New York period setting as well to it. The more I think about it, actually, if you like Inside Llewellyn Davis but wanted something that involved more shouting and running around, then this is this is the film for you.
Yeah, and obviously the Uncut Gems comparisons, as you say, are inevitable. I think I probably liked Uncut Gems more, but yeah, it's got a similar chaotic running from pillar to post vibe as that as well.
I think I also preferred Uncut Gems, and if you haven't seen it, definitely go see that. This is kind of like almost like a slightly more mainstream version of that. I mean, it's a different story, but in a sense it's got Timothée Chalamet rather than Adam Sandler playing against type, and it's kind of a bit more optimistic and accessible and traditionally structured and less bleak.
I don't know, Uncut Gems has a bit more of a straightforward plot structure, whereas this does, as I say, go off on one a bit in the middle. But I don't know, if there's anyone mainstream out there who wants to watch both these films and tell us which one you prefer, which is of course a weird way of saying how edgy and indie we clearly are, he says, having seen the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, we cover a broad range of stuff and things like that. But as we discussed on the podcast before, this is the time of year where, the indie, the arty, commercial and the awards all meet in one big festival of Hollywood, pretending that all the cinema it makes is a serious artistic medium and not just a means to sell McDonald's Happy Meals. Maybe that's a bit bleak.
I mean, you're the one who's meant to love cinema. You go off.
Exactly, yeah. So that's kind of exactly it. And there are opportunities. Films like Fargo, completely independent films, with largely unknown cast, or William H. Macy, I guess, was relatively well known, but still not exactly a huge star. Coming through and like using this time of year to get attention and get awards and make careers for people like Frances McDormand and the Coen brothers. Yeah, and Josh Safdie, I think, is marching his way towards like mainstream success. I mean, working with Adam Sandler again in an unusual way, and then now working with Timothée Chalamet, an actor who's kind of at the top of his game and has got real credibility. He's also clearly got a bigger budget for this. It's more of a period piece, which comes with its additional costs and things like that. There's much more locations, including, I don't know if they went to Japan to shoot the Japanese bits, but more money has been spent on this. Other high-profile names involved. Gwyneth Paltrow's in it. She's quite good, actually, considering she doesn't act a lot, especially outside the MCU for a while. So she does really good playing an aging star of the screen. Also, middle-aged, which is aging in Hollywood terms. And it's definitely got a bigger budget and a bigger train set to play with. You can kind of see that coming together and being used well as, I guess Josh Safdie continues his march towards being a mainstream director.
I mean, he did Uncut Gems with his brother, didn't he? As the Safdie brothers.
Yeah, I'm not exactly...
They're now working solo. The other Safdie did The Smashing Machine with The Rock, which I have not seen. Yeah,
which had some good reviews. I didn't watch it either. But I'm not sure. Yeah, they were the Safdie brothers now. They're sort of got their own ways, similar to the Coen brothers. There's definitely a tonal consistency here with previous Safdies. The film before Uncut Gems, Good Times, is on Netflix, I believe, and I've been meaning to watch it to see if you can chart the evolution of the style as clearly as you can, say, for like the Coen brothers or Wes Anderson or people like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, as a simpleton, a lot of the bits I really, really liked of this, to be honest, were the more straightforward sports comedy bits. I quite enjoyed the table tennis sequences towards the beginning and the parts where he's just running around trying to up himself at table tennis.
Yeah, doing various table tennis type cons, like getting people to bet on him, antagonizing people and looking bad at table tennis to get people to bet against.
Tried to hustle at table tennis in a bar. Yeah,
that was good. Yeah. And he's kind of doing trick shots and kind of crazy things like that, And again, there's a humour running through it, which is that all these people take table tennis really, really seriously.
Yeah, the episode when he meets someone from the world outside table tennis, and he's like, I'm going to be the Muhammad Ali of table tennis. I'm going to be the king of table tennis. And they're like, there's a king of table tennis? Someone plays table tennis.
Other than children? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the films, said at the time when, it was becoming more popular in the Far East, and then that popularity was spreading through to the West. But, it's kind of... It's a period piece and it's set at an interesting time.
Well, occasionally it touches on the fact that it's set not that long after World War II ended, and some of that is still lingering culturally.
Yeah, exactly, especially the distrust and dislike of the Japanese more broadly. One of the main characters, a sort of rich businessman who's backing Marty at one point, and obviously he managed to screw that up, like he screws everything up. But his son, died in the Pacific War in World War II. Yeah, so it's kind of weaving these things together, Yeah, like I say, it's quite an interesting sort of encapsulation of the period, which I also thought was well done, but also anachronistically, or even, as you say, used a fancy film theory word, contrapundally, which I think I've used a couple of times before. The film has an 80s soundtrack, which kind of adds to the sense of fun and play and almost slight unreality of the whole thing. There's New Order and things like that. It's kind of a synthy 80s soundtrack, which is an interesting creative decision to go with a period film, but not with a period soundtrack. It's not contemporary music, it's not period music as well. So I thought it was just an interesting artistic choice, and it works.
Yeah, I think the soundtrack is the same person as Uncut Gems, isn't it? And I don't remember finding the soundtrack quite as standout as I did Uncut Gems, but there are some fun 80s music drops, definitely.
Yeah, this one's got more needle drops. This goes, again, bigger budget. They can license music. But again, Uncut Gems is great and the soundtrack is really good. I mean, the whole Uncut Gems soundtrack is on my writing playlist. It's one of the things I stick on to write to. It is a great spectral, synthy, 80s sounding film score. But again, this one has banger needle drops, which is... I don't remember Uncut Gems having.
I don't think that's really the vibe in Uncut Gems, is it?
No,
Uncut
exactly.
Gems is more about this sense of creeping dread.
Yeah, which is a lot of my music I write to is... But also, I guess, the kind of the 80s thing about this, and this is also something it has in Uncut Gems, which is, and this is really bizarre, but there is a certain amount of references to Look Who's Talking, the weird movie when, Bruce Willis voices a baby's internal monologue and John Travolta's his dad. Genuinely, this is like a thing for the Safdies, which I've seen through interviews. But yeah, the opening credits to this film involve sperm heading through fallopian tubes and meeting an egg. One of the plot lines is he's got his girlfriend pregnant, and that's the opening of Look Who's Talking as well. And Uncut Gems opens with this travelling through this kind of rocky underground landscape to find the Black Opal, which is a kind of MacGuffin of that film. And it's quite spectral and kind of weird. And then in interviews, the Safdies have been asked about that opening, and people have come up with some sort of like arty or intellectual reasons for this, and they've been saying like, no, we just like the opening of Look Who's Talking with the egg and with the sperm in the eggs and things like that. And it's similar. And then this time, when I actually saw the beginners, they're actually just straight up doing Look Who's Talking this time. I think it's part of their sort of sense of humour, I suppose, or Josh Safdie's sense of humour. But it is a bizarre nod. But it's there, and I noticed it, and I just had to say something about that.
I didn't spot the Look Who's Talking reference, but I did, think that intro was a bit, okay, just doing sperm meeting an egg. Although, I guess it does somewhat end up being all about that in the end.
Yeah.
Hashtag spoilers.
Well, I guess one of the ways that he's just like sabotaging himself, he's got his, some random woman who lives in his building is married to someone else pregnant. It's another way that he's just like his own worst enemy.
I don't know. I went into it thinking this could be a masterpiece and ended up really quite liking it. But yeah, it's pretty good.
I think that's definitely the summary that I had. Yeah, I mean, based on the high expectations from Uncut Gems, which I do really love. It's hard to say this film's not as good because, most films aren't as good as Uncut Gems, and this is a good film. But yeah, again, maybe there's a sort of more sort of step towards the mainstream. So it'd be interesting to see what Josh Safdie does next. Maybe he'll be more of a iconoclast director. The next one will be, less mainstream, more individual, swing back and forth, or maybe like the Coens and really mix up the vibe and do something totally different, has a very different vibe to it, or more like Wes Anderson and just kind of work over time refining this artistic style to the point of a kind of its purest form. Yeah, either way, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. That's all we have time for this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice so that you never miss an episode. While you're there, please leave us a nice review. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, to find other episodes of the podcast and written pieces by Nick and myself. If you head there right now, you'll be able to see Nick's top 10 TV shows of 2025 and my summary of film in 2025.
And you could also follow us on social media. We are, of course, on Blue Sky and Facebook, where you can read all the exciting news, such as whether the podcast will be slightly delayed like it was last episode. And if you want to follow me, you could also go to nickbryan.com on the internet or on Blue Sky, or also on Instagram, but with the word dot rather than a dot. And you can hear all about, mostly Courier Z Volume 2, my next comics Kickstarter, coming relatively soon.
And if you want more from me, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram or Blue Sky by searching for Alistair Ball. You can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, or you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. And you can join us here in 2 weeks' time when we will be discussing the latest Russell T Davies TV show in the Doctor Who universe, The War Between the Land and the Sea. And then we will also be discussing Hedda, starring Tessa Thompson in an adaptation of Hedda Gabler. So yeah, two very different things for next time, but I'm sure there'll be as interesting discussion as we've had today. Until then, have a good time and goodbye.
Bye.